the political religion of the nation. Let me say what countless others have said before me. Well said, Mr. Lincoln. Well said. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for May 8th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. We've paused one shipment, says the Secretary of Defense, confirming that high payload munitions are being withheld from Israel as punishment for rolling tanks into Rafah. Is this just punishment, or will this affect how Israel carries out the operation? We'll also have a report from the region. Jurors in the Trump criminal trial in New York City get a rest after yesterday's steamy session, and it might be a while before Georgia jurors get to see a trial in Trump's case there. The Georgia Court of Appeals has taken up Trump's request that Fulton County DA Fani Willis be removed from the case. Removal of the cargo ship from the twisted girders of the Francis Scott Key Bridge will start soon. They'll use explosives so precise the crew can stay on board while the detonation happens. And we'll have two artificial intelligence stories for you. One on how it's already being used in the office, and the second on how it's used in a more high-stakes office, ongoing military operations. Plus, there's another Sriracha shortage, and we've also got pictures of plasma on the sun, and the Olympic flame, born from that distant star, arrives in France. The Daily Report arrives in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with a weapons holdup. The Biden administration says it paused a shipment of bombs to Israel last week because of concerns that the Israeli military could use them in Rafah, where more than 1 million civilians are sheltering. The most prominent public rebuke of Israel's war strategy in Gaza, it also signals President Biden's growing frustration with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The U.S. withheld 1,800 2,000-pound bombs and 1,700 500-pound bombs. U.S. officials say they are also conducting a review of other weapons sales. For more on this, CBS News national security correspondent David Martin joins me from the Pentagon. David, thank you for being with us. Sure. Are Pentagon officials worried that Israel will use these specific missiles that they're holding back, or is it just a punishment of them for missiles that weren't going to be used immediately?
John, I think it's less a punishment and more of a warning not to go ahead with this major ground invasion of Rafah. These 2,500-pound bombs are the kinds of weapons that Israel has been using in its airstrikes, in its war against Hamas in Gaza, and they are the kinds of weapons that inevitably cause civilian casualties simply because of their destructive force. So even when they are accurately delivered onto the precise target, the collateral damage is such that it produces civilian casualties, and the U.S. is basically sending Israel a very specific warning that, okay, we say our support for your security is ironclad, but it is not unconditional.
And do we assume that, or do we know that Israel knew this was coming and went ahead anyway with their current actions?
Well, I think Israel found out about this when the shipment didn't arrive on time. So, and what they've gone ahead with here is not the full-scale invasion. What they went ahead with was the seizure of the Rafah crossing point and the dropping of leaflets and sending out of messages to 100,000 Palestinians that they needed to evacuate the area. But if this were to be a full-scale invasion, the number of Palestinian civilians that would have to be evacuated would be over 1 million.
And the president just approved money that Congress appropriated for Israel. Is that in danger or up in the air now?
The administration says it is not, that these are weapons that come from previous arms sales that contracts have been signed for, and delivery is just now coming up. And that's what these bombs were. They had been contracted for a long time ago. They were on the tarmac, ready to take off, and the hole got put on them.
Do we have any sense of the Israeli military and whether they've got enough munitions? I guess it obviously depends on the scale of what they end up doing, but you know, are their stockpiles still sufficient that they could carry out whatever they wanted if America decided to be even more severe in its warning sending?
Well, you can imagine the militaries keep the size of their stockpiles as pretty closely held secrets, so we don't know exactly how many 500 and 2,000-pound bombs they have, but they have a stockpile. I doubt that holding up one shipment would make it impossible to launch a full-scale invasion of Rafah, but it might have an impact on Israel's ability to sustain the operation over time and still have enough stockpiles to deal with all its other enemies, for instance, Hezbollah on its northern border with Lebanon.
Right. David Martin at the Pentagon. Thank you so much, David.
Sure thing.
The Israeli military says it reopened the Karam Shalom crossing into Gaza on Wednesday. It's been a key crossing for the entry of humanitarian aid into the territory. It was closed over the weekend after a Hamas rocket attack killed 4 Israeli soldiers in the area. Meanwhile, the U.S. is still making efforts for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Remy Inocencio is in Tel Aviv with the details. Remy?
Good evening, John. CIA Director Bill Burns met face-to-face with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this afternoon, but there's no official statement that came from it. But Reuters, citing a senior Israeli official, reported that the two talked about Israel potentially pausing its military operation over in Rafah, and that would be in exchange for the release of hostages. Though Netanyahu, we know, has doubled and even tripled down in the past few weeks that a Rafah invasion would go ahead. Also, Haaretz, which is a well-regarded Israeli news outlet, reported that it didn't at least look like there was any breakthrough in talks, but that the Israeli delegation that got to Cairo just on Tuesday will stay for more talks. Israel is also feeling public pressure from the U.S. right now about not launching a major military invasion of Rafah. The Pentagon, though, has made it a point right now to say that Israel's current strikes we're seeing are a very limited operation in order to cut off Hamas's access to weapons and money. And separately, the Pentagon has confirmed to CBS News that the construction of that floating pier by the U.S. military to boost aid deliveries to Gaza is now complete. We were at the port of Ashdod earlier today, and that's where the pier is right now, about 30 miles south of us from here in Tel Aviv. But the Pentagon says there is a delay in getting it towed to the Gaza coast. That's because of a forecast of high winds, which makes for high seas. Once that pier is finally connected to the Gaza shore, there is a U.S.-flagged cargo ship that is ready to sail. It's called the Sagamore, and it's currently in Cyprus, about 200 miles north of us here. It'll be the first to deliver humanitarian supplies to Gaza by sea. John.
Remy Inocencio in Tel Aviv, thank you. Protests over the war continue to grow around the world. In Sweden, a ship of demonstrators arrived Wednesday to protest Israel's participation in the Eurovision Song Contest. Security is tight in the city of Malmö for the event, as thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters are expected. Meanwhile, more than 300 people rallied outside the parliament building in Greece's capital. And as we noted Tuesday, protesters have been clashing with police in Amsterdam, where a university encampment was taken down. In Belgium, around 100 demonstrators are occupying the building on the campus of the University of Ghent. And in the UK, encampments have been spotted at more than a dozen schools. Now to Capitol Hill, where Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene took her shot. She put forward a motion to remove House Speaker Mike Johnson. It went nowhere fast. The House voted to table the motion. Also on the Hill Wednesday, leaders from 3 of the largest public school systems in the United States pushed back against lawmakers on Capitol Hill that accused them of tolerating anti-Semitism. Previous hearings have focused on anti-Semitism on university campuses, but this is the first to focus on K-12 education. The school officials were asked about several specific incidents over the past few months. Following a heated exchange with the House Education Subcommittee, David Banks, the New York City Public Schools chancellor, referred to the hearing as a gotcha moment.
This convening for too many people across America in education feels like the ultimate gotcha moment. It doesn't sound like people who are actually trying to solve for something that I believe we should be doing everything we can to solve for.
Before the hearing started, the mayor of Washington, D.C. and the police chief were scheduled to separately testify on Capitol Hill regarding anti-Semitism and pro-Palestinian protests at George Washington University. That was canceled after the mayor allowed police to clear the encampment on that campus, ending a 2-week standoff. 33 people were arrested. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now for all the action. Nicole, first, in case people blinked, because that was about as long as it lived, let's talk about that motion to vacate from Marjorie Taylor Greene before we get to the hearing on anti-Semitism. What happened? Well, we'll just start there. What happened?
Yeah, well, it kind of came out of the blue, and it didn't come out of the blue. I mean, clearly, Congresswoman Greene telegraphed last week that she intended to call that motion to vacate this week. But then she met with Speaker Johnson both Monday and Tuesday, along with Kentucky Republican Tom Massie, Arizona Republican Paul Gosar. She emerged from those meetings late yesterday saying that the ball was in Speaker Mike Johnson's court, that she was going to give him some space to kind of digest some of the ideas that she had put forth in terms of how she would like to see him lead as Speaker. Now, at that time, I asked her if she had a timetable, if she was going to rule out calling up that motion to vacate this week, and she didn't rule it out. And what we saw emerge or transpire on the House floor Wednesday evening is that she went forward with that motion to vacate, but it was quickly slapped down by House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who introduced a motion to table. And so because of that, her motion was not successful. It looks like the Speaker is coming by. Nice. Speaker Johnson, are you concerned Congresswoman Greene will bring this up again, sir?
There we go, live television, exactly the question to ask, which leads me to my next one. What do we think is next on this front, Nicole?
Well, again, I mean, I think that is the big question because, again, the Congresswoman also hasn't ruled out potentially bringing up this again, although it's clear that there is not the appetite, as I started to say before the Speaker walked by. In terms of that motion to table, it was something, again, introduced not by Democrats who did put out there that they would potentially table her motion if she brought it up. But, again, that was brought up by Majority Leader Steve Scalise, and it was supported overwhelmingly. I believe the final tally was 359 to 43 or so. You know, I'll have to check my math. There were 7 who voted present. But anyway, an overwhelming vote to table her measure. So whether or not there's going to be the appetite to go through this exercise over and over again, it doesn't seem that there is that desire. Furthermore, the House is due to recess for the rest of the week. So we will have to see potentially when they come back if this continues to be a thing. But at least for now, Congresswoman Greene's motion has been defeated.
Now, thank you very much, Nicole, not to let us distract from the important issues of the day, which is you talked to Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who of New York, who was at the hearing on anti-Semitism. Let's listen to what she told you.
It's not a gotcha moment. Ask Jewish students, ask Jewish families across this country. This is impacting their safety and security. You're having families who are not able to go to commencement ceremonies because they've been canceled. You have a lack of action of these senior level positions, whether it's the chancellor of the New York City Public Schools or whether it's university presidents like Harvard and Penn, who are now former. So no, it's about results, and it's about making sure that all students are protected, particularly the Jewish students who have been under assault in many cases since October 7th.
And just to remind viewers, it was the New York school chancellor who said it was a gotcha moment in that hearing. Nicole, what are lawmakers hoping to achieve with these representatives coming from these school districts?
Yeah, that's right. And worth noting that Congresswoman Stefanik had a pretty pointed exchange with the school's chancellor, particularly over an incident involving a Queens high school where a Jewish teacher was targeted, and the principal of that school, rather than being removed from the school system, was just reassigned within the district. And so Stefanik asked a number of pointed questions about what he is doing and why, and other lawmakers, for that matter, also inquired why he has not that principal has not been terminated. So that was certainly one flashpoint during this hearing. Of course, we heard from administrators not just from New York City public schools, but also from Berkeley, California, as well as Montgomery County, Maryland. And also worth pointing out that there were a number of parents and students at this hearing as well, many of whom that I talked to who said this is a real concern. You know, the Anti-Defamation League has found that there have been at least 246 anti-Semitic incidences in K through 12 schools since October 7th through about the beginning of this year. So they say that this is a real concern. And we heard that concern echoed from both sides of the aisle, both from Democrats and Republicans, in terms of what may be transpiring. Certainly, maybe it's not on the level of what we have seen on college campuses, but it is something that can't be ignored as well.
Nicole Killian showing us beautifully what it's like to cover politics on the Hill, where it's always happening. Nicole, thank you. Donald Trump's protest in his election interference case in Georgia is being heard. The Georgia Court of Appeals agreed Wednesday to review the decision to allow Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis to remain on the state's election interference case. Willis was the subject of a misconduct hearing earlier this year over whether she financially benefited from her romantic partnership with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee ruled that Willis could stay on the case if Wade resigned, which he did immediately. Last August, Willis indicted Trump and 18 of his allies on racketeering charges for their alleged participation in a scheme to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election results. All of the defendants pleaded not guilty. 4 of them later accepted a plea deal. In a statement, the former president's attorney, Steve Sadow, said, quote, President Trump looks forward to presenting interlocutory arguments to the Georgia Court of Appeals as to why the case should be dismissed, and Fulton County DA Willis should be disqualified for her conduct. Think you have what it takes to be America's top diplomat? Coming up, we look at Secretary of State Antony Blinken's globetrotting schedule and what it means to represent the United States on the world stage. That's ahead. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The Biden administration is set to announce new regulations that would give immigration officials more power to quickly reject migrants. It could be announced as soon as Thursday. Sources tell CBS News the rule applies to migrants seeking asylum after illegally crossing the southern border. Officials would be able to deport them soon after they cross. The Biden administration has been weighing options to limit access to the asylum system, which has seen a spike in applications due to illegal crossings. An outside review of the federal agency tasked with maintaining stability in America's banking system found FDIC employees were subject to a hostile and abusive work environment. A report citing complaints from more than 500 employees found numerous instances of sexual harassment and discrimination, calling it a patriarchal, insular, and risk-averse culture. One employee said the agency's response to misconduct is to, quote, pay, promote, or move them. Martin Gruenberg, who has served off and on as chairman for 10 years, apologized in a letter to employees on Tuesday. The chair of the House Financial Services Committee has called on him to step down. Crews at the Baltimore bridge collapse site will soon begin a controlled demolition to remove some of the wreckage. The bridge collapsed last month when a cargo ship hit it. The goal is to remove the part of the bridge laying on the vessel's bow and then refloat it. Officials say they'll insert charges into select parts of the bridge and wrap them with material they liken to large pieces of tape. They'll then ignite the charges, creating puffs of smoke and what sound like fireworks. The bridge span will break apart, and cranes and barges will remove the smaller, broken apart sections. There's been limited access through the port of Baltimore since the collapse. Officials are still aiming to reopen it fully by the end of the month. The central United States saw a third day of dangerous weather. The National Weather Service issued a tornado emergency for the first time in Michigan this week. Twisters were reported there, as well as West Virginia, Arkansas, and Ohio late Tuesday and early Wednesday. We're following more threats from Missouri to Tennessee. For more on all of this, here's Alex Wilson from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Severe weather continues tonight, overnight, and into Thursday morning for a lot of big metro areas. In addition to severe storms, heavy rainfall could lead to flooding. You can see the flood alerts posted through tomorrow morning from Missouri into parts of the Tennessee Valley. Best chance of severe weather tonight and into the very early morning hours of our Thursday, Missouri through middle Tennessee. But you can see as far east as the eastern seaboard, a lot of big communities, Nashville and Atlanta could be very active tomorrow morning. Watch as the thunderstorms roll through. We've got a few complexes, and again, the very heavy rain will continue. By tomorrow morning, places like Huntsville and Birmingham and Atlanta get in on the heavy rain and storms. That could slow down travel. Tomorrow, more severe weather, especially across the southeast and south central. Big hail, damaging winds, tornadoes, and heavy rain all on the table. And by the way, that severe threat extends up into the mid-Atlantic as well. We start the day active, we end the day active. In fact, those storms continue overnight into your Friday morning. For more in-depth coverage, watch the Weather Channel on cable and now live on your favorite TV streaming device.
Alex Wilson, thank you. Last month was the hottest April ever, and it marked the 11th straight month of record high temperatures. That's according to the European Union's Climate Change Service. Last month's average global temperature was nearly 3 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than what an average April felt like in the late 19th century. Experts say the data shows the world is not on track to limiting global warming to 2.7 degrees. Scientists attribute rising temperatures to greenhouse gas emissions and the El Niño climate pattern that warms the Pacific Ocean. The CDC has posted new rules for dogs coming into the United States. Beginning August 1st, any dog entering the country must be at least 6 months old enough for the dog to be vaccinated if necessary upon arrival. They must also be microchipped. The rules are aimed at stopping the spread of rabies. Additional requirements, such as a blood test, may apply depending on where the dog has been in the past 6 months. Labor Day brings many things: the start of the final political sprint, the end of summer, the beginning of school, and the return of Sriracha. You didn't know it went away? Well, sweet child of spring, it has. Hoi Fong Foods is warning wholesalers that it will be halting its Sriracha production until after Labor Day. The beloved sauce has been plagued by periodic shortages in recent years owing to problems with supplier relations and farming conditions. The cause this time, severe drought in Mexico, fueled by climate change, which makes it impossible to grow the key ingredient, red winter jalapenos. The company says their chili peppers are, quote, too green. So now a possible new Labor Day tradition. When summer is over, the heat will return. Artificial intelligence has revolutionized the way millions of people work. The same is true for militaries around the world. But some experts want to keep this advanced technology in check. Good luck. We'll discuss whether we've already gone too far. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gailey has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing and bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. A Georgia appeals court will review a judge's decision to let Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis stay on the 2020 election interference case against former President Trump. The court's decision to grant Trump's appeal will likely delay the start of the actual trial, with Election Day now just 6 months away. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene put forward a motion to remove House Speaker Mike Johnson Wednesday. Moments later, the House voted to table it. Johnson said, quote, "Hopefully this is the end of the personality politics." The Israeli military says it has reopened the Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza. This government video shows trucks carrying humanitarian aid there. The site is a key point for aid entry, but was closed over the weekend after a Hamas rocket attack nearby killed 4 Israeli soldiers. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in the U.S. after visiting Guatemala to discuss, quote, humane migration management with Western Hemisphere leaders. That's the third continent in the last 8 days for America's top diplomat. Travel is part of the job, obviously, but we wanted to take a look at Blinken's schedule as a way of understanding the complex web of U.S. foreign policy interests. A month ago, Secretary Blinken started in France and Belgium, meeting with European and UN leaders about everything from the ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza to the situation in Haiti, to enhancing Europe's trade cooperation with the U.S. The trip also coincided with NATO's 75th anniversary, at a time when the organization is considering the historic admission of Ukraine. A little less than 2 weeks later, he was back in Europe attending the G7 foreign ministers meeting, a gathering of chief diplomats from the world's largest economies. Topics included climate change, those wars again, and how misinformation destabilizes the G7 nations. A few days later, China, a visit to America's biggest global competitor. Among the many issues Blinken pressed PRC leaders on was the disruption of the global flow of synthetic drugs like fentanyl, which Blinken also addressed last week during a trip to Arizona and an emergency call center. April ended with a trip to the Middle East to advocate for a potential hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. It was his 7th trip there since October 7th, when Hamas attacked. He also stopped by the World Economic Forum in Saudi Arabia to talk about economic and climate issues with Gulf leaders. The travel patterns of a Secretary of State offer a snapshot of an administration's foreign policy priorities and also tell us something about the unpredictable and volatile menu of challenges facing America's leaders. To discuss that global landscape 6 months before the election, we're joined by John Alterman, Senior Vice President at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. John, thank you for being with us. When you look at the global set of challenges facing this administration and the next one, and that travel by the Secretary of State, what's your assessment of the world out there?
The world is a mess, and there is a lot you can do by phone, and there's a lot you have to be in person to handle, and the Secretary of State is doing it in person. And, you know, part of the biggest, there's a problem of just stamina and how you keep circling all those time zones one after the other. The other is drinking from the fire hose, keeping straight. You're in this country, these are the issues. Another country, those are the issues. And he's doing a full-time job while constantly being on the move and constantly changing his focus. It's a tremendous, tremendous act of stamina.
And you've worked at the State Department, and you're an expert on the Middle East. The term shuttle diplomacy was born in the middle of a war in Israel back in the 70s. Blinken has now been to the region numerous times. Give us a sense, you were talking about the stamina, give us a sense of what those visits are like. What's the hope for them? What happens in that shuttle diplomacy?
Well, I think the shuttle diplomacy has become much more intensive, you know, partly because everybody's connected by phone and you're dealing with social media, you're dealing with all these different information streams. I think one of the particular problems that Blinken has is it's not clear people are done fighting in this conflict. And so he's trying to move people forward. One of the things I find really striking is there's a theme in all the things I hear him talking about. He keeps talking about we need to recognize the humanity of the victims here. I met him and saw him talking at an event in February about people who are being held hostage overseas. He was talking about humanity. The idea that you can do all those, keep it all straight, and actually be focused on the idea that people are affected by what you do, you're trying to improve people's lives, I think is tremendously difficult, and he stays focused.
You mentioned social media, the streams of information which an administration has to take in, make choices, and then send their people out, the Secretary of State being the primary one. Are we in a new era of diplomacy? And if so, how should we think about the requirements of that new diplomatic era?
Look, we're partly in a new era of diplomacy because television started it. We talked about the CNN effect, constant streaming. Everybody has access. Everybody has cheap telephone calls, free telephone calls. We're in a world where there's too much information, and the Secretary of State is still trying to deal with a tiny number of people who have tremendous power to make decisions and persuade them to do what they otherwise wouldn't do. That's really hard to do, and he's doing it while constantly changing his clock around. One of the things they used to say about Secretary of State Jim Baker is he had his own time zone. Yeah. And there were times there were 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and he would be working full time, and everybody on the team would be working full time, because the Secretary of State's job really never sleeps.
And I want to ask you finally, John, about a specific question about these latest developments, given your Middle East expertise. How has the weapons decision by the Biden administration, how has that changed things? Are we at a new stage now in relationship between U.S. and Israel?
We're at a new public stage. It wouldn't surprise me if there were times before when the U.S. either explicitly or implicitly held up some shipments to Israel. But the fact that everybody is talking about it, this is the U.S. flexing its muscles. It's reminding the Israeli government, but also the Israeli public, that the United States has interests it's going to advance. I think combined with the impending action in Rafah, the ongoing action in Rafah, I think we are likely to be entering a new phase.
John Alterman with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much, John. A major supplier of Boeing's 737 MAX planes is being accused of cutting corners at the risk of passenger safety. A whistleblower who worked at Kansas-based Spirit Aerosystems is breaking his silence to speak with CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve.
While working at Spirit, I almost grew a fear of flying. There's about 2 or 3 units that is in the back of your mind that you know that you would never want to fly on.
You think there are planes out there that you wouldn't want to fly on?
But knowing what I know about the 737, it makes me very uncomfortable when I fly on one of them.
Meanwhile, Turkish authorities are investigating after a Boeing cargo plane landed without its front landing gear. The plane touched down on its nose at the Istanbul airport. The Turkish Transport Ministry says no one was hurt in the incident. It's unclear why the landing gear failed. It's the latest incident involving Boeing, which continues to face scrutiny from regulators after a series of incidents on its planes. We are living in a Hiroshima moment, so says military strategist Frank Sauer about the world of artificial intelligence. This cutting-edge technology is being put to use by the world's militaries. Autonomous weapons systems are already on the battlefield in Ukraine and Gaza using big data and drones. AI is helping military planners select targets, program strikes without human input. And it's also being used to fly jets. Antony joins us now. He's a research professor for strategy, the military profession, and ethics at the Strategic Studies Institute of the U.S. Army War College. Thank you so much for being here. That Hiroshima moment was mentioned at this meeting of representatives of some 140 countries that recently convened to talk about the dangers of AI and robots. What's your assessment of where we are? Is the genie still in the bottle, out of the bottle? Where are things with AI and military use?
Yeah, well, hey, John, thanks for inviting me here, and I'm very glad to be here and to talk to you about this. Certainly the genie's out of the bottle. I just don't know that. I don't know that we're exactly at that Hiroshima moment, because I think there's a lot of hype about what this technology can do and how it works, and how it, and the role of humans in making it work. So right now, to get a really good targeting model, it requires a lot of data. For example, if you want to find a tank on a battlefield, you have to have a lot of images of a tank or other kinds of sensitive data linked to a tank. in all kinds of environments, because lighting, angle of the sun, time of the year, all sorts of little things can change the, how the model interprets what it's seeing. So structuring that kind of data can be kind of expensive and time consuming, and certainly error prone. And so from what I know is that, many of these systems, they're facilitating human decision making, but they're not as effective without that human in the loop.
And yeah, the U.S. and China are expected to hold arms control talks, if that's even the way you talk about it, over AI. They're going to meet and talk about AI. What does that say to you about the status of this technology if those two countries are meeting to talk about its use?
Yeah, no, another good point. And as I understand those talks, the focus is using AI in control, nuclear system control, in systems that control nuclear weapons. And you certainly, it's not the case that they don't raise issues, because where you are using it, you do set conditions for what we call automation bias, where you kind of rely on the machine more than you actually should. And there are ways to kind of deal with that, but in something as serious as a nuclear control system, you don't want to take any chances. So that's certainly good, and the technology will certainly advance, I think. However, at the moment, I think there's like I said earlier, I don't think it's quite doing exactly what people think it is, and even what some people are using it saying it's doing. In many cases, the AI is getting a unmanned aerial vehicle, for instance, out to an area, but it's still the human who has to do the targeting for that machine to be effective.
And finally, briefly, if it's possible, how's the Defense Department thinking through these? We may not be there yet, but how are they thinking through the ethical challenges of this when the Pentagon actually does get there?
No, that's a great question. When I would give the DoD fairly high marks for actually taking these kinds of questions on in the beginning. At the outset, regulations were published ensuring human control. They've adopted a responsible AI strategy. They've engaged industry and elsewhere in terms of what kinds of controls and protocols need to be in place to ensure the machines are engineered to function ethically, because that's kind of what distinguishes AI from, say, other systems, that you've got to engineer the ethics into it from the outset. It's not something you can really do on the back end, because these things, their capabilities can change over time and how you use it. So if those things aren't in there in the beginning, you might have a hard time integrating that there in the back end.
Dr. Antony Pfaff, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Artificial intelligence is also changing the way we work. A new Microsoft report shows 3/4 of workers now use artificial intelligence. Ahead, we'll speak to a Microsoft executive about how that's changing the way we work. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discovery, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
The swing state of Wisconsin has received several major investments during President Biden's time in office. $1 billion to replace a major bridge, $1.6 billion to expand internet access, and $811 million for clean water projects. On Wednesday, Biden added to that list while also taking a swipe at his main political rival. The president announced Microsoft will invest $3.3 billion in Wisconsin. At the heart of the investment is an artificial intelligence data center expected to create more than 4,000 jobs. The administration says it will be constructed at the site of an abandoned Trump administration project. As part of the investment, Microsoft will also partner with a local technical college, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and community organizations like the United Way. They'll train locals for STEM roles and consult with business leaders on AI solutions for their companies. Microsoft Thursday released its annual Work Trend Index report, and artificial intelligence was at the center of its findings. The company surveyed 31,000 desk workers across 31 countries. 75% of workers say they currently use artificial intelligence. And perhaps because of that, 45% worry AI will replace their job. Business leaders have the opposite concern. 55% of them worry about having enough talent to fill roles. When it comes to integrating AI with their current workforce, 79% of business leaders say adopting AI is essential to remain competitive. However, in a demonstration of how the training gap feeds the skills gap, only 25% of companies have plans to provide the training they say is so important with artificial intelligence. For more on the way we work, we're joined by Jared Spataro. He's Microsoft's Corporate Vice President of AI at Work. Jared, thank you for joining us. So AI's use in the workplace has nearly doubled in the last 6 months. How is it actually being used?
Well, let's take a step back for a moment. Those stats were great. A good summary of the report. 78% of the AI tools that are being used in work are actually brought in by the employees. They're not sanctioned by the organizations themselves. So it's being brought in as employees are using them for things like looking and summarizing information. They will use it for synthesizing data. Sometimes they are using it for creative pursuits. Just about any place where they could use a little bit of a leg up, we find that employees are using it to get some time back.
So they're using it to get some time back. They're training themselves. Why aren't companies doing that kind of training and making the workers kind of bootstrap their own lives?
If you look at kind of the diffusion of technology, this fits a pattern for very disruptive but valuable technologies. If you think back to the PC revolution, if you look at the internet, the smartphone, All of those things were brought into the workplace first by individual employees who just got a jump on it. They realized in their consumer lives that it could be useful to them. So it fits the pattern. It takes typically an organization a little bit of time to figure out what to do next. And I think that's the snapshot that you see with this new report, John. We're just seeing that moment in time. I think this year is the year it's going to get very real for organizations.
Is this changing the way we work?
It absolutely is for those who are learning how to use the tools. We were able to identify through our data essentially 4 different types of AI users. And at one end of the spectrum, there is what we call power users. These folks already save 30 minutes or more a day using AI tools. That adds up to over 10 hours a month. And they are saying that it's already changing their flow of work. It's changing how they approach the tasks in their jobs. And it's kind of reprogramming how they approach how they're getting things done. So it is having a big impact. I think we're just starting to see the front end of that, really.
If I'm watching and I'm nervous, I don't have the skills. What are the base level skills that workers should have, given the way the workplace looks now?
Boy, it's a great question. Going back to that stat you cited, 45% of workers are a bit worried that this is going to take their job. And in fact, those who are even using it, 52% of those don't dare tell their employers. So let's talk about just for 2 seconds what those skills look like. First, you need the skills to understand what AI can do well enough to just look for opportunities in your job. Where can it summarize? Where can it write content? Where can it help me make better decisions? Then second, there's what is called prompting, which is just a fancy way of saying learning how to ask questions to the AI. We're typically trained by search engines where the less you put, the better. With AI tools, it's almost exactly the opposite. The more context you give, the better. And then finally, the last one that is really important in this age of AI is actually being a person and being able to pass judgment on what you get back from the tool. You have to judge, is this right? Is it wrong? Is it useful? Do I need to go do some additional research to make sure I can use it? And that's why we call our particular product Copilot. We're always putting the human in the loop. They have to make the final judgment.
And finally, Jared, in terms from the employer side, if they hear that people are doing this on their own, how should employers leverage this new technology to make sure that it's being used well and to advantage what their goals are?
Well, I think if you're seeing your employees using it, that's actually a really good signal. That means you've got innovative employees who are trying to get the job done more efficiently. So take it as a good signal. But then you should start to take a look at some of what we would call the commercial or enterprise grade tools that are out there. This is going to give you the security, the compliance, the control that you need, and especially help you apply it to bigger types of database problems where you're using your own data. So it's an excellent sign. We think it's a really good start, and we would encourage leaders just to jump into the process.
Jared Spataro, Microsoft Corporate Vice President of AI at Work. Thank you.
Thank you.
After 12 days at sea, the Olympic flame is back on land. Now it's in France ahead of the Paris Games. We'll tell you what's next for the flame. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
but with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on the groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
The European Space Agency's solar orbiter captured stunning new video of plasma swirling on the sun's surface. The video was captured back in September, showing the orbiter transitioning from the sun's lower atmosphere to the much hotter outer corona. It even captures a small eruption on the sun's surface, but while it may look small on the camera, the eruption is actually bigger than the entire Earth. The Olympic flame arrived in Marseille, France, after a 12-day voyage across the Mediterranean on Wednesday. The flame, which is traditionally lit using rays of the sun, was carried on a 19th century ship, escorted by more than 1,000 boats. An estimated 150,000 people witnessed the lighting of the Olympic cauldron. Once the festivities wrap up, the flame will begin a 68-day journey through France before arriving in Paris for the 24 Summer Games. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. The United States is pausing weapons to Israel. What shifted in the U.S. response and what it means for Israel. Artificial intelligence is being used in conflict zones like the one in Gaza, and it's raising ethical questions. We will discuss them. Microsoft, meanwhile, says AI is growing in the office. But what does that actually mean for workers and bosses? We'll get some insight from Microsoft itself. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you